All right, so I guess Brian, you made it through part two of the Star Wars Heresies, interpreting the themes, symbols, and philosophies of episodes one, two, and three by Paul F.
Yes.
McDonald.
I did. Yeah, I just finished up the Attack of the Clones section. This was like my own personal hero's journey was getting through the second section because for some reason it took me a really long time to get through it. I don't really know why. I mean, it's only like 50 pages long or something, so it's not even like that much content. But we're gonna kind of talk about all the sections, and I think maybe a little bit of why I kept kind of dropping off on it. I wasn't as steadfast in reading it as I was the first part, but I did find the second part enjoyable, and I think there were a lot of good themes and stuff to touch on. And we talked about kind of the first section and a little bit of the background of the book in a previous episode where we talked about the heresies of the Phantom Menace. So go check that out if you want kind of the heresy background there and a little bit more info about the book.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens in Attack of the Clones, like, mythically and character-wise. Like, so much ground is covered in that movie, and so much ground could have been covered. Like, we talked about how in Attack of the Clones they did film some Order 66 stuff, which I'm so glad they didn't include because that would have just been way too much for one movie. But yeah, a lot of ground is covered, like, character-wise, but it's almost like in episode 1 you have the setup, and then in 3 you have the payoff. But yeah, so like middle chapters like can be kind of nebulous sometimes. So
Yeah, I think that was kind of my bigger struggle here with this section. The Phantom Menace section did an amazing job of kind of highlighting these mythical ties that the characters and the story beats had, and I wasn't finding those as much here in the second section. And partly I think that's due to the fact that it's a lot of the same characters, so it's a lot of kind of the same conclusions and mythical ties and stuff like that. So it was a little bit less of that, and it was more of just kind of telling of the story, which I still found interesting, but I didn't find it as deep and as rich of an experience, just in terms of making these heresies ties in the book. But I'm definitely looking forward to getting into Revenge of the Sith, which we'll do in a future episode too. But yeah, I think that was kind of my bigger struggle with it. Is it seemed like a lot of it was a little bit thinner and a little bit more reaching kind of in this section, but I think a lot of that, like I said, had to do with the fact that these are the same characters, so kind of those parallels had already been made in the first section.
yeah, and I think like my favorite heresy was the one about midichlorians and the Force, and to this day, like, I will go to the gates and defend midichlorians, like, because I just think they're so fascinating. But
It's because you have a high midichlorian count.
yeah, that's why. But Attack of the Clones, a big part of it was the love story. So it starts off with chapter 10, the love. And we have this quote from Anakin: "Attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life." And I think that's like one of the best quotes in all of the Star Wars, better for being an Attack of the Clones, but I think that's like what the love story is, what people had the biggest problem with in the prequel trilogy, probably, other than like CGI, which as we're talking, we released an episode on CGI today, so you can listen to that. But yeah, it's interesting. What did you think about the love story in Attack of the Clones?
Yeah, I thought that the love story was good. I mean, obviously that if you're telling a story about Anakin Skywalker and how it ties into the fall of Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader, and obviously we know from the original trilogy that he has these twins, right, Luke and Leia. So there has to be some sort of love story, right? There has to be some sort of way that he had Luke and Leia. So the love story was inevitable. I mean, I can kind of get on board if people, don't like it, because the writing is, maybe not the best, or, the way that it's presented maybe is not the best. You and I look at it, and we can kind of see maybe kind of the inspirations that Lucas was, taking and sort of, telling kind of this more courtship of a love story. But certainly if you weren't jiving with that, I could understand why people might have been reluctant to accept it. And the book here talks about that quite a bit in this section of just being kind of this instance of a forbidden love, more of like a Romeo and Juliet type of a love story than what you would think of as like in a more modern like romantic tale.
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of talked about how maybe Attack of the Clones killed love in Star Wars. Like, they're like, we're just not doing that. And if we do love, it's going to be more like the Han Leia stuff. But, like, I'm someone who loves love, so I'm kind of sad. But no matter what I think, like, the love story in Attack of the Clones was, like, one of the most heavily criticized aspects of the film. I don't know if it was like a problem of writing, directing, or just the execution, but it's Anakin and Padme is more stylized, like you said. Like, it's kind of like Romeo and Juliet, Tristan and Isolde, Lancelot and Guinevere, rather than that kind of like, I don't know, like His Girl Friday, that kind of banter that Han and Leia have. So it's kind of more formal. Like, I think, like, Attack of the Clones is the first instance I ever heard the word milady. And it was like, why are they saying that so much? But I think they were just trying to harken back to that kind of medieval love story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So I kind of liked that sort of parallel that it drew, and then also kind of the parallel with like the kind of the troubadour trope, which is kind of something that you see in Anakin, literally kind of singing the love and the praise of Padme, which is something that happens kind of throughout the whole of the prequel trilogy, but especially here, as he's kind of professing his undying love to anyone that's willing to listen to it, until Padme herself is willing to listen to it, which we kind of talked about in our hero's journey episode here on Attack of the Clones. But I kind of liked thinking of Anakin as not this, I don't know, kind of a teenager that is professing his love so much, as thinking of it more as like a troubadour. I don't really see that, but if you put that in front of me, I'm like, okay, I can get behind that, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, here we're cashing in on our first Joseph Campbell quote of the episode, but
all right,
I'm quoting.
We should have a counter.
Yeah. As Joseph Campbell has noted, in courtly love, the man goes crazy, not the woman. And I was like, you know what? I think that does kind of track true, in Attack of the Clones, because it's like Anakin has no chill, and he's definitely the one who, like, because he loved Padme and couldn't lose her, like, the galaxy was transformed from a republic into an empire,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and there was another detail I kind of liked. So I'll quote the book. If anyone is looking for a direct link between Attack of the Clones and the world of Dante and medieval romance, Padme's former suitor's name is tellingly Paolo. This neatly references the tragic lovers of Paolo and Francesca, who Dante encounters in one of the circles of the Inferno. I believe they are in Circle 2, or is that one? It's Lust. And I'll continue quoting them, but Francesca was reading the story of Guinevere and Lancelot with Paolo, who was her husband's brother. The two were so swept up in the tale of forbidden love that they passionately wrote one of their own. And it's interesting because you see, like, Paolo and Francesca, like, there's sculptures of them by multiple artists. There's paintings of them. So if you go to an art museum and you go to like a classical like section or wing, you're probably going to see something based off of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I thought that part was interesting, and a lot of these instances, you know, kind of within the book and what we know about, you know, George Lucas and the way that he would, you know, kind of tap into those stories. That's where a lot of these names come from. We're going to get to one a little bit later here when we talk about Naboo itself. But yeah, I think that stuff like that is really interesting, and kind of the naming conventions for these characters and planets within Star Wars.
Yeah, and I love this quote at the end of the section. In a film dominated by procreation, with entire armies of droids being built or clones being grown, it is the simple union of two people beside a lake on Naboo that eventually determines the fate of the galaxy.
Aw.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. You could put that up on like a tapestry there if they would have lived happily ever after. But unfortunately, That's not the case. That's not the case.
Yeah. So then chapter 11 is the teacher, and for some reason, like, I just don't vibe with the heresies on Obi-Wan. Maybe what I'm most interested in is his Revenge of the Sith heresies.
Yeah, because in the Phantom Menace section, the Obi-Wan stuff was a little bit thin there, and this section for me, the teacher was really thin as well. Kind of the chapter just served as a retelling of Obi-Wan's story throughout the film, which you know it was fine to read, but it wasn't anything like above and beyond that too much. It talks a little bit about Obi-Wan learning kind of these Zen lessons from like the kids at the Jedi Council, and how he has friends in the galaxy like Dex from Dex's Diner, but that was about it. That was about the the long and short of what I took out of the chapter.
Yeah, I guess there could be a message like Obi-Wan learns from Dex and he learns from the Jedi younglings, you know, like you can never really predict where wisdom will come from. But yeah, I think looking forward to the heresies of Revenge of the Sith, like I think there's more for us to kind of get into there. And also, like, if there was ever a heresies of Kenobi, just kind of like in between episodes 3 and 4, like I think that's when Obi-Wan does a lot of his growing.
Yeah, for sure, in the way that he's going to be kind of represented in that way. And I think that, yeah, like you said, the Revenge of the Sith section will be much better in terms of kind of fleshing out the mythological portions of Obi-Wan's story. Because, like I said, in the first one and in the Phantom Menace, you know, Obi-Wan is a very, very secondary of a character. Much more a major character. In this one, we actually kind of included him as the half of the main hero of our hero's journey. Episode on Attack of the Clones, but yeah, not a lot of good links in this section for me.
Yeah. So Brian, chapter 12, The Learner. Can you quote that quote at the beginning in like your most petulant voice?
The quote at the beginning and my most petulant quote.
Yeah.
I will be the most powerful Jedi ever. I promise you. I will even learn to stop people from dying. That was pretty good. I think
that was excellent. Like, replace Hayden Christensen. You know,
get him out of it.
No, I'm saying that jokingly. I actually love Hayden Christensen's portrayal. So.
Oh well, shot through the heart. That's okay. Hayden is much better than I am at being angsty. That's for sure. That's kind of the big thing that you take away from this section right here. Right, is it tells a lot of kind of these links to like tales of like biblical wrath in terms of dealing with like the Tusken Raiders and his response to kind of these visions. I like kind of ties into Balder from Norse mythology, and having kind of these very, very downer of visions that Anakin does. So I kind of liked that. Those kind of ties. We're kind of back in full swing here on our heresies for the book, I thought, here in Anakin's section.
Yeah, I kind of I don't know. Anakin, I kind of wonder if, like, audiences, like, you know, have kind of been hearing about Anakin since, like, 77 and throughout the 80s and had a whole lot of time to kind of imagine what he was going to be like, and then the prequels came, and then he's a 9-year-old kid in the first one, and then in the second one, like, it's kind of like he's not really like Luke, the traditional hero, kind of like King Arthur or a fairy tale hero. It's kind of like he's just moody, you know. Like I said, he's kind of like Achilles, you know, and it's like he has like this large destiny of like bringing balance to the Force, but he's just kind of like I guess you could say he's similar to James Dean, you know, in Rebel Without a Cause, and I wonder if there's ever been anything Star Wars titled Rebel Without a Cause or Rebel with a Cause, because, I mean, like, so many of them are rebels. Like, they're just sitting on that pun, and if they haven't done anything with that, that's actually kind of tragic, but, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely, they should be doing that. I have to look through the Star Wars Rebels titles for their episodes and see if they ever leaned into that a little bit, because that would be good. That's too good to pass up on.
Yeah, I'm just pouring some vanilla Coke with vanilla creamer, so if you can hear that, that's why.
Excellent. Stay hydrated out there. It's hot.
And I have water and chocolate milk too, so I have like so many things. But yeah, it's kind of funny because I think people forget how much Luke whines and like Anakin whines, you know? And I just think it's an interesting chapter because I've always loved Anakin, and I've always kind of loved that the prequels are like a tragic trilogy because it doesn't end with like, you know, Luke says at the end of like Return of the Jedi, like, I'm a Jedi like my father, before me you failed, your highness, you know, like at the end of the prequel trilogy, not to jump too far ahead, he turns into Darth Vader, you know. But I guess, like, in some ways, when we were talking about our hero's journey of the prequel trilogy, it's kind of like, I think it's kind of like Anakin's story is sort of done, you know, when he loses his mother. The rest is pretty much written, you know, like, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You could definitely make the argument that that is pretty much the stop of the development of Anakin Skywalker and kind of the birth of the development of Darth Vader. So yeah, you can certainly look at it in that sense, I think.
Yeah, and they kind of go on to say, like, Anakin is kind of like, I guess, like, kind of like a potential godly figure in the prequels, but he's kind of just stuck, like, being, like, a vengeful deity, you know, like, that's not really improving the lives of people. Like, he massacres the Tuscan village, you know, and as the chapter went on, I'm quoting the book, and it says, "Death is perhaps the origin and foundation of all mythology," and it talks about the world's oldest story, the Epic of Gilgamesh. In this myth, Gilgamesh is the Mesopotamian king of Uruk, and he has to launch into a series of adventures which will make him a better, less egotistical ruler. And kind of like at the conclusion of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I have yet to fully read it in totality, but I'm working on it, but it's like the oldest story ever found. They're grappling with the question of mortality and death, and like we're still grappling with it, you know, and I did kind of see some parallels with the prequel trilogy, and in some ways I don't know what people wanted with Anakin and the prequel trilogy, but maybe it wasn't like a forbidden love story in which, like, the hero has to deal with loss and love and death, but yeah.
I guess, looking back on it in hindsight, if you're looking to tell the stories of the prequels, you can either tell it the way that George Lucas told it here, as kind of this rise and fall and this tragedy of a story, or you can just have it be a bunch of hallway scenes with Darth Vader, and then he shows up on the Tantive floor at the beginning of A New Hope, which unfortunately I think is what some people might have wanted. But I think that the story that we got, and kind of looking at this character from being having the innocence of a child and growing up and kind of what that means, and then the pressure and the speculation of being the chosen one, and then this ultimate sort of tragic fall, I think is far more interesting in terms of a story.
Yeah. So chapter 13 is kind of like seen as an unfortunate number. This one is about the senator. It's about Padme Amidala. It took me many years to kind of figure out the whole twist of the Phantom Menace and be like, but her name's Padme when she's a queen and a handmaiden, and then also a senator. Yeah, so I don't know if you had trouble with that or just were smart from the very beginning, but it is interesting because I think people have said a lot of things about the prequels and kind of rewritten them, but I like the prequels we got, but I think the main thing I'm kind of disappointed by is Padme in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. I kind of just wonder if Lucas had gotten some help with the writing. She could have been more of a character with kind of more of an arc, rather than just falling in love and kind of being acted upon.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because as a character, and we all love Padme. We all kind of love her books, and kind of then the telling of her stories more so in the Clone Wars. Although I think there probably could have even been more of that in there as well. You have her set up as this queen figure, and then the senator. So very two appointments of very important roles for a character, but then basically is just sidelined then, especially here in the role of senator, right? We don't see her doing hardly any senatorial things throughout the course of her time as a senator. Just seen more as this object of affection for Anakin. And the story has to go that way a little bit, like we'd mentioned kind of at the top there in the love story. Obviously this needed to be a love story, but her story within the three films did not have a lot of agency. More so, I think, in the first one, in the Phantom Menace, I think, more so. But yeah, definitely here in this one, is kind of absent from her role as a senator. And even kind of in this section of the book here, in the Heresies book, it talks about Naboo, took its name from the Babylonian god of wisdom, and that quote even refers to her as being the queen, which she wasn't the queen at this point in the films, so that might have been a better inclusion for the Phantom Menace section. And then it goes on to talk about the artistry of Naboo and how it's this kind of beautiful place, but it doesn't really talk about her, and I think that part of the reason for that is because she's almost, like I said, she's this angel character for Anakin Skywalker, right? She's a senator, but she's not participating in the Senate. So really, all she's doing is just being there to be an object of affection for Anakin Skywalker in this film.
Yeah. In some ways, I'm like, should she have been a senator in Episode 1? I don't know. In some ways, the way the prequel trilogy is set up, in some ways I would like a movie in between 1 and 2, and that's a heresy in itself, probably. But it seems like a lot of Padme's political scenes in Attack of the Clones, and especially Revenge of the Sith, were cut out. So, yeah. But
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, like I said, I mean, we have supplemental material that's amazing. The Padme books are really really great, and then kind of the storylines we saw within Clone Wars were nice as well. But yeah, within the confines of the films, if that's what you're analyzing, then it gets a little bit thin there. I would have liked a little bit more agency for Padme.
I did like this note at the end of the chapter, like, tellingly, the scene was slightly altered after the original release of the film, with Lucas ensuring Padme takes not only Anakin's real hand in hers, but his new artificial one as well. Because I think, like, sometimes, like, Star Wars works better when it's silent, and it's, like, kind of just these images, and it's, like, as imperfect as the love story was executed, like, it does kind of hit some of those, like, tragic love notes, and, like, kind of, like, it's not meant to be psychologically real, it's more like a tragic fairy tale, and it's, like, so I like that part.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it from that stance, then it falls into the kind of this leaning into the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, which is good, but yeah, I think that the character herself could have been a little bit more fleshed out.
Yeah. So I remember Chapter 14, The Hunter, on Jango Fett, like, being, like, 30 pages long, but it's not. But, like, I mean, like, 30 pages in a good way. Like, it was blowing my mind. Because this was written pre-The Mandalorian, like, Disney Plus was not even imagined when this was written. I think it came out, I think 2013. But it just made me think of The Mandalorian and Din. What about you?
Yeah, you definitely see kind of a lot of parallels and things that it took into The Mandalorian in the way, because kind of the bulk of this section, kind of almost similar to kind of Obi-Wan section, is it's kind of just telling the story here of Jango Fett, but it places a lot of importance as Jango Fett being this hunter type of a character, which sometimes I saw the parallels with, sometimes I didn't, but I thought that it was really neat kind of analog to examine Jango Fett as kind of this classical mythological telling of a hunter type of a character, and I really liked then kind of the symbolism of that Jango Fett's face and facelessness with the helmet was going to go on to serve as the hunter here in this section of Obi-Wan, but then to be the ally to Obi-Wan within the clone troopers themselves, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, because masks and armor, we see, like, masks and armor in so many civilizations all over the world. Like, when you go to a museum, like, it's just so cool to see masks and armor from all over the world. And I mean, like, going back to like Paleolithic caves, like, so much was done with masks, and, like, sometimes they have, like, ritual significance with, like, religion, and they also are used in battle, in ceremonies and everything. And maybe I'm just a nerd and I'm like, ooh, they're talking about armor, because, like, when I, like, go to museums, I'm like, oh, they have sword exhibits, they have armor exhibits, and they have helmets on display. But I just, like, when I was reading this, I was like, Joseph Campbell was quoted so much, and, like, like, basically, if anyone says Joseph Campbell and, like, takes him seriously, I'm like, ooh, I'm intrigued, Right. But I was just kind of amazed that in 2013, like, someone was kind of thinking these thoughts, and it kind of seems like they took snippets from, like, Jango Fett. Like, we saw Jango Fett, like, be a father to Boba, and, like, we have Din and Grogu and the importance of masks and armor and Beskar, so It just kind of seemed like uh, this chapter was a link between Attack of the Clones and the Mandalorian.
Yeah, absolutely. It did a it painted a really good picture. Obviously, we talk about Knights of the Old Republic and Canderous, and you get to see a lot of Mandalorians in there. But kind of until Attack of the Clones, we didn't really know anything about the Mandalorians or anything like that. And I guess even if you just watch Attack of the Clones, you still don't get like a ton of it, really. You get to see kind of his interactions with Boba Fett. You get to see him with his jetpack and all of his kind of gadgets there on Kamino and the Geonosis arena there. So to kind of tell this chapter of the story kind of in this way where you're drawing these parallels, kind of with this mythological hunter type of a character, I thought was really interesting. And then, yeah, definitely kind of leads into kind of the same sort of thing, yeah, like that we're seeing in The Mandalorian now.
Yeah. So what did you think of Chapter 15, The Count, on Count Dooku?
I thought that the chapter on the Count was pretty good. I really like Count Dooku as a character. I find Count Dooku more and more interesting every little bit that we learn about him, and every time I kind of think about Count Dooku as a character. I like that he drew kind of this parallel here with the First Noble Truth, which is suffering, which is meant to represent idealism, which got me thinking back to our episode that we did with Gabe Young back there, talking about different, yeah, exactly, talking about different religious aspects there of Star Wars. So I thought that was interesting. There were a couple things in this chapter though that I don't know, they were interesting for sure, but I didn't really know how they fell into the realm of the Attack of the Clone story, because it talks about a cutscene where Jocasta Nu is talking about the 21 Lost Jedi. That's not really in the movie, so is it a link? Yes, but no, not technically, I guess. And then it also talks about the Night Sisters arc in the Clone Wars, which again, kind of the same thing. But that's at least something that actually made it into media. So I thought that those were kind of weird. Interesting. I still thought that they were interesting, but I didn't know like how much to put into those, like I said, because they weren't actually, part of this film section that I'm reading about.
Yeah. I found this part, I am quoting the book, in the novelization R.A. Salvatore provides even more background when Obi-Wan ruminates on Count Dooku's finely chiseled bust. Yes, Obi-Wan had seen this kind of intensity in Qui-Gon on occasion, but what he knew of Dooku was that, unlike Qui-Gon, the man had never been able to shut it off, Salvatore writes. The lights in his eyes were ever-burning fires. In other words, he was a Jedi unable to yield to the wisdom of the Force and more concerned with imposing his own will in his own time. Because I find it so interesting that, like, Dooku was Qui-Gon's master and they had a lot in common, but they kind of went to opposite sides of the Force. Like, I think, like, Qui-Gon exemplified the best of what a Jedi should be. And I think for all of Dooku's noble intentions, he fell to the dark side. And what did you think of the part where it was talking about, like, Count Dooku was being honest with Obi-Wan on Geonosis?
Yeah, I think that I like that to an extent for sure, because, kind of the more we learn about Count Dooku is that, Count Dooku was not really doing this for, doing what he did for nefarious reasons. He was really doing it, because from his perspective, that was the right course to take, right? The Jedi had lost their way. He was trying to do his best to, preserve the galaxy. So I think that, within the film and what he talks about here in this the Heresies book, that makes a lot of sense. That what he was telling Obi-Wan was exactly true. Not even from a certain point of view, but definitely from Count Dooku's view, which then left me kind of wondering here in this last kind of section here of this chapter. He quotes Alan Watts, who says that Dooku lays a trap for the world in which he himself gets caught, which is kind of true. He gets caught up in what he had done, but I don't think when you say that he lays a trap, that makes what Count Dooku did sound more nefarious than what I think he was attempting to do, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's that saying, like, the path to hell is paved with good intentions, and I think Count Dooku had good intentions, but no matter what his original motives, they say in the end of the chapter, Count Dooku lost himself in his own quest for more and more power in the end. And then, I don't want to spoil, Revenge of the Sith, but, yeah.
Not great for you, Count. Sorry about that.
Chapter 16, The Separatists. Do you think Count Dooku and, like, the Separatist movement should have been in Episode 1? Or hinted at?
I think definitely Count Dooku should have been. When we talked about that, the hero's journey bit of Attack of the Clones, is that unfortunately you don't get enough time, I don't think, with Dooku, within the confines of the film, to really understand him or his motivations. Which was why I said, kind of the more we learn about Dooku, within, like the books, like Dooku Jedi Lost, and what we just got with Tales of the Jedi, and other stuff, it gets more and more interesting, kind of the more you learn about him, because in the film you don't learn that much about him. So it would have been really nice to at least kind of plant a seed with that, or to have maybe there was a way to work in the 21 Lost Jedi into the Phantom Menace, or if that was even an idea that Lucas had when he wrote the Phantom Menace, or if that came later. Because looking back on it, it would have been really kind of easy, when Qui-Gon takes Anakin to the Jedi Council, and they're saying that he's too old to begin. Look what happened to the Lost 21. That would have been good, right? And then we would have known at least who Count Dooku was, or at least that he was one of these kind of lost Jedi that lost their way. So going into it, when he just kind of sprouts up, and we're like, who is this guy, and why is he important? That would have been nice.
Yeah. It's funny because the more, like, I kind of learn about the political story of the prequels, I think some people, like, when they came out, like, were like, politics are so dumb, like, what relevance does this have on, like, our lives? And it's like, and then kind of just, like, kind of seeing the results of, like, 9/11 and the War on Terror, and, like, the elections of, like, 2016, and just the rise of other political figures around the world. It's like, oh, that's what relevance they have on our lives, and
those are probably the same people that are saying right now that Star Wars has never been political.
Yeah, it's funny, even though it's kind of not. There's this quote that says, the prequels bring this point powerfully home as Padme and other honest defenders of democracy are crushed under a tidal wave of corporate callousness and institutional indifference. And it's like, I don't know, sometimes, like, the real world can be crushing because everything can be a system, and that can be a good or bad system. And, I mean, we have systems in place because, like, theoretically they help us help each other more, but sometimes, like, it's just, indifference, It's like, this is the way it is, so things can't be better, So it's kind of sad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to read kind of this section. We've moved on into the section about the Separatists, I believe, right? Let's see. So this is a quote by science writer Stanley Rice. Outlines this in passé. Individual humans may want to create peace, but governments often want war. Individual humans may want to be unselfish, but unselfish individuals are beaten down by corporations. Individuals may want to reduce the devastating impact of the human species on the planet, but their efforts are swamped by collective greed and waste. And I think that is a really good quote and kind of a really good connection to make here, and talking about the separatists, which kind of this section is almost more just about kind of the politics of the galaxy as a whole. It's not specifically about the separatists, I don't think. But I think that's good, and that's kind of a theme that we got, kind of there in the tail end of the prequels and Attack of the Clones and into Revenge of the Sith, and we're definitely getting it now and stuff like, Andor, and even something like Boba Fett, right? Or the Book of Boba Fett, that there are heroes on both sides, right? Not everyone is out to do good that's on the side of alleged good. Not everyone's out to do bad on the side of alleged bad. And I liked that quote, right? So you could be operating within yourself from a place of good, but not necessarily be on the side of good. And I kind of like that juxtaposition. And that's kind of the gist of what this section goes on to talk about. It also talks about the Darth Bane trilogy of books and the Darth Plagueis novel, and making some ties into there, which doesn't have anything to do with Attack of the Clones, but I thought that was kind of interesting inclusion too.
Yeah, I mean, it brings to mind the opening crawl for Revenge of the Sith, like, war, there are heroes on both sides, evil is everywhere. It's just so poetic and so true. Like, for me, like, the opening crawl text is the best in Revenge of the Sith, like, because it's poetic and hits on those truths, but the chapter ends with a quote from the poetry of William Blake, who is a poet, like, I'm familiar with, but, like, he put out so many poems, like, I can't possibly have read them all, but it's my goal to read them all, and he illustrated his poems, so, like, good for you, William Blake. So I'll quote this quotation: "When nations grow old, the arts grow cold, and commerce settles on every tree."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really kind of nice end piece there to the section here on the separatists and the politics. And it kind of reminds me of that sentiment you get in The Last Jedi there with DJ. They get on that ship there coming off of Canto Bight, right? And it's an arms dealer, and he said, basically it's that same kind of thing, right? Is that commerce now, right? The selling of weapons has become more important than the people that wield them. So
it reminds me of a quote from Pirates of the Caribbean 2. I think it's called Dead Man's Chest, but you have Elizabeth kind of questioning, I think it's Lord Beckett, and he says, I think it's like, loyalty is not the currency of the realm. And she's like, what is the currency of the realm? And he's like, currency is the currency of the realm. And I just thought it was really funny. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
The early 2000s, man. Like, there were some really good movies coming out then. So
that's right. Early 2000s were full of hits. That's for sure.
Okay. Chapter 17, The Chancellor. Can you... this is just the episode where you're going to do a lot of voice acting, but can you kind of do your best Ian McDermott with that quote?
Oh, let's see. "It is with great reluctance that I have agreed to this calling. I love democracy. I love the Republic."
Yeah, I think the best executed character of the
Pretty
prequel
good.
trilogy. Yeah, you did excellent.
Yeah,
I would give you an
you.
Oscar,
Yes.
Yeah.
I accept.
Yeah. It is with great... You could have said, like, it is with great reluctance that I have agreed to take this Oscar, because there are so many more deserving. But
You sounded like Helen Mirren. That would be good. Helen Mirren would be an excellent Palpatine, though, on a side note.
Yeah. Make her Kreia. I used to be like, I would be like, is that too obvious? But I'm like, you know what? She's great. Like, make her Kreia. I hope she can ice skate, you know.
That's right. She could learn. She's amazing.
I hope our listeners understand what we're talking about. But anyways, yeah, the best executed character in all of the prequel trilogy, in my mind, is definitely Palpatine.
Yeah, absolutely. And this film and the whole of the prequel trilogy, Qui-Gon was executed really well as well, I think. But yeah, definitely Palpatine here, playing the Chancellor, is really really good. And this section does a pretty good job. Again, it's kind of just outlining, kind of the story here through Attack of the Clones for the Chancellor. But there's a really neat, well, not neat, it's really kind of terrible, a parallel that it draws to 1933 Germany and the creation of the Enabling Act, which basically allowed Hitler and his cabinets to basically make any law that they wanted, which is pretty much what Chancellor Palpatine is doing here in this film. So a real life parallel, within, not yours and my lifetime, but definitely people's lifetimes here with us on the planet. So that's pretty chilling stuff, and a really good parallel that was drawn here to this section by Lucas, and kind of highlighted here in this book.
Yeah, and kind of the prequel trilogies kind of like brought to my attention just the patterns of Rise of Empire, because you can kind of see them with ancient Rome, and I mean later in the year we're going to get the movie Napoleon, and like Napoleon kind of took a republic and turned it into an empire, and you can make arguments that the original and prequel trilogies, well, actually Lucas has even come out and said it, later on, that it was inspired by Nixon and the Vietnam War, and people see the parallels with like the War on Terror and how certain leaders have, handled that. So it's kind of just like a pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It is a pattern, and it kind of goes through how that pattern works and repeats itself kind of through this thing, as the Chancellor's, very much with that quote that I open with, right, is woe is me, but I guess I will do it. And that was a big thing that Luke's kind of talked about here when writing up the politics for it, is that a politician, or a good politician, goes in, does their job, and then leaves. They don't stay around, because that's not doing politics or working for the people anymore. That's kind of pursuing your own sort of agenda then at that point, and then makes those kind of connections to Nixon and Watergate and stuff like that. So yeah, I thought that stuff was really good, and the book does a good job here of kind of all those times that it gets churned back up for the Chancellor, as he's able to work his way there and get poor Jar Jar on the hook to declare him ruler of the whole thing.
Yeah, and it even kind of talks about like how Palpatine manipulates Anakin, and like in some ways I'm like, did that raise like 0 red flags? Yeah, I wish Qui-Gon had survived, but it's kind of like he's the devil, and we see that even more in episode 3, but like it's kind of like you have this potential like messiah of the Force, like, and Palpatine is just kind of like whispering in his ear, like saying like, you're the best Jedi ever, you're better than Yoda, like kind of just like giving him a whole lot of false confidence. And I don't know, I think like Lucas is kind of done talking about Star Wars for the main, like for the most part, but like I just kind of there should be a book on Palpatine, like maybe from like a psychological point of view, like a book of essays, or like Skywalker, A Family at War, like Palpatine it could be like, this is how I did it, you know, like, imagine.
Yeah, that would be really cool to go in and tell a little bit more of that tale, or look at it more, you know, scholastically speaking.
Yeah. It would be like up there with Kreia. Okay, this isn't in the Heresies, but what do you think would happen, like, if Palpatine and Kreia met?
I don't know. Kreia has her little 3 lightsabers that fly around, so that would be good if they got into a fight, I guess. I don't know, because they're both very much master manipulators, so I don't know. It would either be they would join forces and you know, completely just dominate the whole thing, or they wouldn't be able to stand each other, and, you know, be the ultimate downfall of the other.
Yeah, that would be such a cool fan film to see, Kreia versus Palpatine. What would Palpatine say? Like, I am the Senate, and, like, I don't know, maybe Kreia would say, apathy is death, you know? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
I want
sure.
them to fall in love. No, just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm absolutely kidding. But
yeah, that would be interesting. We're getting off on a tangent now. Maybe we'll have to explore this in a whole episode now. But I'm kind of thinking about the way that, you know, they each kind of taught their respective pupils. So you have, you know, Palpatine and Anakin Skywalker. You have Kreia in the exile there, and the way that worked. And Palpatine was really kind of this teacher of using, you know, kind of false confidence and false bravado and working that way. Whereas Kreia, on the other hand, was just like, nah, you're just going to question everything. You're not a hero or a villain. You're totally ambiguous, and just deal with it.
that is actually interesting, because in some ways, in some situations, when someone tears you down and just, like, doesn't like you, but, like, for some reason, like, the student wants to impress them to prove them wrong, like, sometimes like that can be a motivator, you know? It's
right.
Interesting. But yeah, like, the haunting quote from Palpatine, "The power you give me I will lay down when this crisis has abated." I don't know if that has ever happened in the history of politics, except for, like, you know, the legend of Cincinnatus, I think, Cincinnati. That's, like, the one time it maybe happened, but...
Well, I think, forgive my lack of knowledge on American history, but that's kind of what happened with George Washington,
oh,
right?
Duh.
He served as the president, and then, you know, they basically demanded that he do it again, and he's like, okay, and then left.
In my mind, I was thinking of them as the same person, because that parallel was actually made, like Cincinnati and George Washington. So yeah, this is what happens when you have too much chocolate milk. So yeah.
That's right. You're gonna have to switch over to the water now.
Yep. All right, the Sages, 18. This is about the Jedi Council, isn't it?
It is about the Jedi Council, and their failings. Not really. I guess they don't really have failings yet, but they have some inklings of failings. And one of the kind of themes of this section here is it talks about the Jedi and how they deal with their hidden enemies. And there's kind of a really good little section here where, you know, basically they're talking Yoda and Mace Windu, and, you know, Mace is like, you know, if there's a Sith here, we should have totally known that, right? And Yoda's like, yeah, probably, but we can't let anyone know that we didn't know it, because then we'll get more enemies. So in a way, they're being kind of lackadaisical with their inability to do their own job. Which isn't great. It never really works out as well as you might think that it should. So there's that. You also have kind of the stance, even, you know, kind of very first thing in the film. I forget the exact quote, but Mace Windu says, you know, we're keepers of peace. We're not soldiers, something like that. And that kind of ties into the Christian theme of like putting down your sword and not fighting. So, literally not taking their own advice from the beginning of the film at the end of the film when they're literally going to war.
Yeah, I mean, there's some like people out there like I've talked to, and they're smart people, but sometimes they say like, how did Yoda not know that Palpatine was a Sith Lord? And it's like, they even kind of talk about it in the movies, it's like the Jedi Council are just kind of like high in a tower, think they know everything. They're kind of close-minded, not open-minded, and they kind of keep it a secret because they don't want people to know that they have weaknesses. And they were just kind of, even though, like, I think Mace is a good person because he has a purple lightsaber and not a red one, and Yoda's, like, a good mentor, he's not perfect, and they kind of learn in Revenge of the Sith that they were wrong, but in some ways that's, like, a good lesson to realize because, like, in Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, like, Yoda is, like, one of the best mentors in all of cinema, and if Yoda can fail and learn from it, I think we can all fail and we can all learn.
That's right. Failure, the best teacher is, says Yoda there in the Last Jedi. So in the Rise of Skywalker. So, yeah, definitely a lesson, I guess maybe he finally learned. But, Yoda in Attack of the Clones was the one that really pushed back and was like, no, we can't say anything. And I guess we'll have to see how kind of the High Republic stories end up going. But, for the most part, none of the members of the Jedi Council have ever had to deal with Sith, so how would they even know to recognize one if one, walked in through the door and was like, hey, I'm a bad guy, are you sure? We don't really know for sure. So, yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to look at that. And I think that the Sage section here really kind of piggybacked really well off of the section from the Phantom Menace where it talks more about, the Jedi kind of sitting in this ivory tower and then how that plays out. So I'm excited to see what McDonald has to say about the Jedi Council as we get into Revenge of the Sith and Order 66 and stuff.
Do you think that in an alternate Revenge of the Sith, if Palpatine and Yoda fought in the Jedi Council chambers, and then, like, Yoda, when he was kind of defeated, fell out of the Jedi Council chambers from that great height, if maybe more people would have understood symbolically what was happening?
Maybe. Yeah, especially because, I mean, you get, obviously, you're coming from the height there on the Senate floor, and you get that, kind of beautiful visual of, Palpatine's, desk or pedestal or whatever as it's kind of rising up through the floor, but really kind of the way that it's shot and edited, you don't see Yoda making this, kind of huge fall, right? I mean, he's kind of like hanging onto the side. It makes that awful little like nails on the chalkboard sort of sound as he falls off of there. But you don't get like the big like visual of there being like a very symbolic fall or fall from grace kind of a thing. So that could have been a little bit more visually impactful, maybe, I guess is the way I'm trying to say.
It's easy to be an armchair director and like, they should have done this.
True. but to that, to that end, though, I think that it was symbolic that it happened in, kind of the Senate chambers where, Palpatine was really rising to power, and Yoda had, not his power, but the Jedi's power was kind of lost there in that room. So,
yeah, I almost dove into Part 3 of Revenge of the Sith, but maybe next time you can have me do some quotations.
That's right.
So yeah, I like the book, and there are some chapters that are more engaging than others, but I think they're all worth reading and kind of worth thinking about. And I don't know, I kind of just wish that Star Wars had more scholarly books, like on the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy. So
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, if you have any good book recommendations out there, definitely let us know, because Cassie will read it and then tell me if I have to read it or not, and that'll be good.
Yeah.
And definitely make sure you check out the Star Wars Heresies, Interpreting the Themes, Symbols, and Philosophies of Episodes 1, 2, and 3 by Paul F. McDonald. It's a good read. Like you said, some of the chapters are a little bit better than others, or make more ties and things like that. But it's still interesting to read through these stories in kind of a more analytical sense, and how they tie to tales of mythology, tales of religious tales, even kind of real world parallels that Lucas was drawing from. So definitely give it a read. It's worth your time. It's a pretty easy read, even if it takes me forever to get through it. That is not because the book is hard to get through. It's because I am a slow reader. But that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. And before we close, I want to say that I know who Cincinnatus is, and who George Washington is. So.
That's right. That's the heresy of the Old Republic podcast for sure. So thank you for joining us. Let us know if you have any good book recommendations. We'll check them out, and may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.